I hired a new babysitter, and my son has been acting strange ever since. Babysitters should be a person you trust with your kid, someone who's expected to do their best to keep things under control, safe, and normal. At least that's how it's supposed to be, especially with a 6-year-old child. It was the time of year when I really needed someone to watch my kid, as I was always away at work but just couldn't find anyone. His father left us from a young age, so it's only been us two. I remember uploading a post to Instagram asking if anyone qualified would take the job. It must have been a late November day that I got that DM from an eager babysitter, Sheila, offering to watch my kid when I was away at work. I was so desperate that I didn't even think twice before saying yes. I just didn't realize how bad of a decision that would turn out to be. At first, she seemed nice and as normal as any normal person could be. The very first day, she entered my home with a new houseplant and greeted me as well as my son in a very warm manner. I have to say, I was very impressed at the time. It wasn't long before my son and her were getting along like two peas in a pod. In fact, I'd say they started becoming closer than I would have liked them to be. I started working later and later, and that meant she'd spend more and more time with him. I'd come home to see that my son had made several drawings of him and Sheila. There was even one with a drawing of me, but I was crossed off. I know my being away was probably taking a toll on him, but I didn't know that it was getting to the point of being angry at me. You'd think that by providing him with a caretaker that he gets along with so well, he'd be at least grateful to me. The drawings only got worse from there. There'd be sketches of me portrayed as dead, beaten, or abandoned by my son and Sheila. In fact, I had walked in once to see Sheila lightly kissing the top of his head, watching interestingly as he completed another absurd picture. It was more than disturbing. I was shocked that my son, being so young, would think of such things. When I finally confronted him about these things, he angrily replied, "You're not my mommy, Sheila is." I didn't know what else to do, so I threatened to find another babysitter if he didn't get his act together. He didn't take it too kindly to me saying that and ended up throwing his crayons at me. I decided to sit down with Sheila as well and talk to her about my son's behavior. Although I was expecting her to be offended or defensive, she was actually pretty understanding. "You know how kids can be," she said a bit too sweetly. "He's acting out because he misses you and barely gets to see you." Her words were so convincing I couldn't even tell that at the time. She was lying straight to my face. 2 weeks after talking to her, I came home to see one of the most disturbing things I could have ever imagined. I called Sheila, informing her that I was going to be running even later that night. I had a work meeting that night, and it was going later than I expected. I told her I'd be home an hour or two later than I usually am, but since the meeting ended 10 minutes later, I got home much sooner than that. She, however, didn't know that. I walked into my house and my eyes landed on Sheila, not only rocking my son back and forth in her arms like a baby, coddling and cooing to him, but actually breastfeeding him like an infant as well. I dropped my bag and began mumbling gibberish before I was actually able to spit out a full sentence. "How long has this been going on? You know what? No, I don't want to know. Get out of my house. Get out of my house now." I grabbed a broom and began swatting her towards the front door. "Creep, you'll never get near my son again, you hear?" Getting her out of the house was easier than I expected. I watched as she sulkily made her way to her car. For a moment she stopped, and I expected her to turn around to come back and protest, but she didn't. I closed the door and walked over to my son, who was now sitting on the couch. "It's all right now, sweetheart. She's gone." I lifted my hand to hold his cheek, but he smacked it away. "You're not my mommy. Sheila is my mommy. You could never be like her." He stomped past me and stormed up the stairs all the way to his room, where he slammed the door. I sighed, but I thought he'd get over it eventually. After all, he was a kid who'd snap back from anything, so I thought. In no time, I hired one of my co-workers' daughters to fill in as a babysitter for my son. I wasn't stupid. I knew it would definitely take time for him to warm up to anybody else, as he was still loyal to Sheila. I had just hoped that things were finally back to normal and that they'd be okay. It was a day that I had actually gotten off of work early. This had never happened before, so when I say I was overjoyed to get home to my son, I really was. I pulled into my driveway thinking about maybe ordering a pizza for my son and me, when I saw a familiar car parked in my spot. It was Sheila's. I could feel the adrenaline instantly shoot through my whole body, and I flew out of my car without another second passing. The front door was open when I finally reached the porch, and inside I could already see someone laying on the ground, my co-worker's daughter. I dashed inside to see Sheila there, standing there with my son clutched to her leg. On the floor, my newly hired babysitter had multiple stab wounds in her back. I could feel my stomach contents creeping up my throat, but I did my best to suppress them. What have you done?" I croaked. Sheila pulled a knife out from behind her back. "Step away from the door and I'll spare you." Even in this context, her words remained calm and even sweet-sounding. It only made it more eerie than it already was. "Don't take my son. You can have anything you want, but not my son." Sheila smiled. "You see, that's the thing you don't get. I already have your son. In fact, I've had your son since the very first day he started drawing those images." I tried making a grab for my son, but she took a jab at me with the knife, slicing a part of my arm. I said, "Move away from the door." I had no other choice and did what she asked. I watched as the two made their way to the entry. Through tears, I pleaded, "Son, don't leave me, please." I'm not going to lie. My whole heart believed that he'd change his mind. He just had to. Instead, he completely disregarded me. "Let's go, Mommy," he said, hugging Sheila close. That was the last time I saw my son. Obviously, I called the cops, but to this day, he is still missing. Sheila's Instagram or anything linked to her was deleted. There was absolutely no trace of either of them. It was the hardest lesson I ever had to learn. If you aren't there for your kids, someone else will be.